In the silence of the night, an orange beam of light pulled him from his home and carried him into an alien spacecraft. A 90-centimeter tall creature with brown skin and octopus-like tentacles awaited him. Inside the craft, Fujiwara encountered mysterious beings and traveled to places beyond Earth. But upon his return, he found himself isolated, holding a truth that no one else could understand or believe. What really happened that night, and why has science never been able to explain it? Prepare yourself for a story of mystery, fear, and intrigue in the case of Yoshihiro Fujiwara. Have you ever wondered what really happens in the skies and the seas? What lies hidden beyond what the human eye can see? Welcome to Immaculate Constellation, where the mysteries of the cosmos come to life. Here, we go beyond science, exploring accounts of encounters with beings from other worlds, sightings that defy all explanations, and theories the government doesn't want you to know. Get ready to question everything you believe about the universe. The truth is out there, and we're here to chase it. Subscribe now, because the reality you know may never be the same again. The city of Katami, located in the Hokkaido province of Japan, is known for its vast agricultural fields and harsh climate. In the 1970s, it was a predominantly rural area, with few houses scattered among extensive plantations. It was a quiet place where the routine revolved around food cultivation and fishing. In the midst of this isolated landscape lived Yoshihiro Fujiwara, a 28-year-old young farmer. He led a simple life, dedicated solely to harvesting, which was his main source of livelihood. Solitude was his constant companion, while worries about the weather and the harvest dictated his daily life. Yoshihiro's house was modest, surrounded by dense forests that frequently housed wild animals. On the night of April 6, 1974, Yoshihiro was surprised by an event that would change his life forever. The usual silence of the early morning was interrupted by the persistent barking of his dogs. Still drowsy, he initially didn't give it much importance, believing the animals were just reacting to the presence of some animal in the forest. However, the barking was followed by loud knocks on his front door, causing Yoshihiro to get up abruptly, filled with a mixture of curiosity and irritation. The remote location of his residence made it unlikely that anyone would unexpectedly appear. Only the neighbors who lived miles away knew about the existence of his house. Irritated by the possibility of being the target of a prank, Yoshihiro walked to the door, determined to confront whoever was there. However, upon opening the door, he found no neighbor, let alone any children. What was revealed before him was something he could never have imagined or forgotten. When Yoshihiro opened the door, the sight before him was as terrifying as it was surreal. Before him stood a tall creature with an appearance that defied any common description. Its slimy brown-orange skin resembled the rough texture of a frog, but with yellowish and bluish patches that seemed like hardened scabs. Instead of common limbs, the creature had appendages resembling octopus tentacles. Two of these limbs served as legs, ending in rounded protrusions, while two others acted as arms with pointed extremities. Instead of a nose, there was a V-shaped hole, and its upward-pulling eyes gleamed with an unusual light. The long, thin mouth grotesquely cut across its face. The creature was not unprotected. It wore something that seemed like a transparent plastic covering its entire body, accompanied by a conical helmet with a pulsating antenna on top. The antenna emitted faint electric discharges, lighting up the dark early morning surroundings. While Yoshihiro tried to process what he saw, the creature raised one of its tentacles, pointing upwards. Instinctively, Yoshihiro followed the gesture with his eyes and saw something even more impressive. A huge flying object hovered above his house. The UFO was about 8 meters in diameter and floated about 20 meters above the ground. It emitted a bright orange light, illuminating the entire area around it. Before Yoshihiro could react, a beam of orange light shot out from the UFO, enveloping him completely. The intensity of the heat was suffocating, and the force of the beam pulled him upwards as though an invisible hand was gripping him. Desperate, He tried to resist, but the light was too powerful. In a matter of seconds, Yoshihiro was sucked into the object, leaving his house behind and beginning a journey he could never have predicted. When the orange light surrounding Yoshihiro finally dissipated, he realized he was lying on a cold metal floor. As he stood up, he looked around and realized he was in a completely different room from anything he had ever seen. The walls were covered with a metallic blue surface that reflected flashing lights in various shades, creating a disorienting atmosphere. At certain points, there were accessories that looked like air vents or technological devices he didn't recognize. A panel on the wall displayed strange symbols that looked like writing, but were incomprehensible to Yoshihiro. The environment was claustrophobic and dominated by a repulsive smell, so strong it made him nauseous. Driven by instinct, Yoshihiro tried to explore the place in search of an exit, but he quickly realized he was not alone. Two creatures similar to the one he had encountered at his door emerged from a corridor. Though their movements were slow, their presence was threatening. Yoshihiro tried to scream and run, but he felt paralyzed, as if his mind were being invaded. It was at this moment that he clearly heard a voice, but not coming from their mouths. It was direct communication in his mind, a form of telepathy. The words were simple: no danger. We will release you near home. Despite this message, the fear that gripped Yoshihiro was unbearable. Even after hearing the reassuring words, Yoshihiro tried to resist. Fighting against the terror and the sensation of mental control, he began to run down one of the corridors. Turning a corner, he saw a hatch partially open. Without thinking, he threw himself through it, falling into an empty space that seemed to be an exit. He felt the outside air around him and suddenly realized that the UFO had descended to about 10 meters from the ground. Seizing the opportunity, he jumped, landing hard on the ground. Despite the pain, he quickly stood up and ran toward the nearest house to ask for help. After his desperate escape, Yoshihiro reached the nearest house, where a couple who already knew him received him. Trembling and struggling to breathe, he recounted what had happened, though his words were confused and fragmented. The hosts, initially skeptical, were intrigued by Yoshihiro's condition, especially when he realized that more than an hour had passed since the event began, even though to him, everything seemed to have lasted only a few minutes. Still shaken, Yoshihiro returned to his house at dawn, where he would try to organize his thoughts and understand what he had experienced. Less than 24 hours after the event, Yoshihiro began to experience strange symptoms. An excruciating pain took over his ears, accompanied by a burning sensation in the tips of his fingers. As if guided by an unknown force, he grabbed paper and pencil and, in a trance-like state, began to draw symbols he had never seen before. The geometric shapes and intricate markings made no sense to him, but flowed as though dictated by something external. During this process, Yoshihiro reported hearing a voice in his mind saying, "When you land on the mountain, you will embark." He didn't know whether it was an order or an invitation, but curiosity began to overshadow the fear. In the days that followed, Yoshihiro noticed other intriguing changes. Small metal objects, like spoons and pieces of wire, began to move slightly when he concentrated on them. At the same time, he felt as though he could pick up thoughts from other people or even communicate mentally with the creatures he encountered. This discovery frightened him, but also fascinated him. Yoshihiro knew that his life would never be the same, and he needed to understand the origin of these abilities that had emerged after the inexplicable encounter. 2 days after the first contact, Yoshihiro decided to follow the telepathic message he had received. Convinced that he was supposed to go to Nikoro Mountain, he invited 2 friends to accompany him to the base of the location. Despite their skepticism, the friends agreed to help him. They arrived at the foot of the mountain at dusk, and Yoshihiro, following the instructions that seemed to echo in his mind, asked his friends to stay there while he climbed alone to the summit. When he reached the top, he encountered the same orange UFO that had abducted him days earlier. This time, he felt no fear, only a curious mixture of attraction and resignation. Without resistance, he boarded the craft. Inside the UFO, Yoshihiro encountered the creatures once again, who seemed to be waiting for him. During this journey, he reported orbiting the moon and Earth on a path that lasted about an hour. Interestingly, he did not clearly remember the conversations he had with the creatures, as if his mind had been manipulated to erase certain moments. Nevertheless, he described a feeling of tranquility and that he was being guided by something greater, though he remained unable to fully comprehend the purpose of it all. In a later encounter, Yoshihiro claimed that the creatures took him on an interplanetary journey. The craft traveled to Mars, Jupiter, and finally Titan, Saturn's largest moon. He described Titan's surface as a vast and barren place, covered by a strange orange fog. During the stop, one of the creatures collected a stone from the surface and gave it to Yoshihiro as a memento. Filled with anticipation, he took the artifact to scientists at Kitami University, hoping they would validate his experience. However, after analysis, it was concluded that the stone was similar to those found on Earth, which weakened the credibility of his story in the public's opinion. After his reports of interplanetary journeys and the revelation of the analysis of the Titan stone, Yoshihiro Fujiwara's story quickly spread through the Japanese media. While some were intrigued by the case, others ridiculed him, calling him a liar or someone seeking attention. The inconclusive results of the scientific analysis of the Titan stone strengthened the skeptics, who used it as proof that his story was nothing more than an invention. Despite the public judgment, Yoshihiro maintained his stance, insisting that every detail of what he had told was true. Yoshihiro became the subject of ridicule in the region where he lived, which isolated him even more. Neighbors and acquaintances avoided speaking to him, and many began to see him as an eccentric or disturbed figure. However, he never attempted to move or flee from the criticism. On the contrary, he faced the negative comments calmly, claiming that those who mocked him simply did not understand the magnitude of what he had experienced. For him, it was more important to maintain the truth of his experience than to please the skeptics. Despite the skepticism, Yoshihiro's case found support among some ufology scholars, who considered his reports consistent with other stories of alien abductions. These researchers argued that post-abduction symptoms, such as perceived time loss and psychic abilities, were common in similar cases around the world. To these ufologists, the ridicule of Yoshihiro was more a reflection of the collective fear of accepting the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Thus, his story began to be documented in specialized circles, ensuring that his account would not be entirely forgotten. As time passed, Yoshihiro began to make even more extraordinary claims, asserting that he had become the spokesperson of the Cosmic Union of Calls, an organization that, according to him, was made up of interplanetary beings dedicated to maintaining cosmic balance. Although he never clearly explained the purpose of his position or the responsibilities associated with it, Yoshihiro insisted that he had been chosen by the creatures to play a crucial role in the preservation of life on Earth. Additionally, Yoshihiro claimed to have access to 3 UFOs stationed in a remote area on Ridak Mountain. According to him, these craft had advanced technological capabilities, including the ability to prevent natural disasters. He described, for example, how the UFOs could deactivate volcanic eruptions by dropping rocks in the volcanoes before they became active. These claims, though fascinating, were met with even more skepticism and disbelief from the public and the media. Among the abilities Yoshihiro claimed to have acquired, the most impressive was astral teleportation. He said he was capable of traveling millions of light years in a matter of minutes, describing in detail how his consciousness would detach from his physical body to reach distant places in the universe. As an example, he said he could visit a star located 250 million light years away in just 6 minutes. Furthermore, he claimed that his psychic abilities allowed him to prevent catastrophic disasters, though he never provided concrete proof of these feats. For Yoshihiro, these abilities were a gift from the beings who had transformed his life, but for the world around him, they were just more reasons to question his sanity. In 1995, Yoshihiro Fujiwara mysteriously disappeared, leaving only questions and speculations. That year, he told a few acquaintances that he had received a new telepathic message from the creatures. According to him, He was to be invited for a final journey aboard a UFO. However, Yoshihiro did not reveal details about the nature of this trip, only mentioning that it was something grand. After this declaration, he was last seen near Ridak Mountain, a location he frequently associated with his extraterrestrial experiences. Yoshihiro's disappearance further fueled the mystery surrounding his story. Some people believed he had chosen to isolate himself from the world due to the constant ridicule he endured. Others suggested that he might have actually boarded a UFO, never to return to Earth. There were also those who believed he simply got lost or suffered a fatal accident in the inhospitable nature of Ridak Mountain. The fact remains that to this day, his whereabouts are unknown, and no concrete evidence has been found to explain his disappearance. For the ufologists who studied the case, Yoshihiro's disappearance was the final piece of a puzzle they considered to be one of the most complex abduction cases ever reported in Japan. Yoshihiro's legacy lives on, not only because of the mystery of his story, but also because of the possibility that he truly experienced something beyond human understanding. Meanwhile, his figure remains a polarizing symbol, a man who many consider crazy or a liar, but who others see as an explorer of the unknown, someone who challenged the limits of our perception of the universe. Even after his disappearance, Yoshihiro Fujiwara's story continues to intrigue and divide opinions. Some believe he was a visionary chosen by extraterrestrial forces for a special mission, while others consider him a victim of hallucinations or a storyteller seeking attention. Regardless of opinion, the cultural impact of his account is undeniable. His story has become part of Japanese ufological folklore, inspiring books, documentaries, and debates on the existence of life beyond Earth. One of the most intriguing claims Yoshihiro made was his continued contact with the beings through telepathy, even after the main events of his abduction. He claimed that the extraterrestrials shared with him advanced knowledge about the cosmos, although he was never able to prove it. Additionally, the psychic abilities he said he developed, such as telekinesis and astral teleportation, remain points of controversy among those studying the case. Finally, Yoshihiro's case raises questions that go beyond its veracity. It represents the human fascination with the unknown and the desire to understand what lies beyond our planet. For those who believe, his story is proof that we are not alone in the universe. For skeptics, it is an example of the complexities of the human mind and the narratives it is capable of creating. Regardless, Yoshihiro Fujiwara's abduction is a mystery that continues to fuel the imagination and debate, challenging the line between the real and the fantastic.